The sun was melting beneath the horizon like dropped French vanilla ice cream pooling on the sidewalk as I turned the page on the Star Evening Edition. The skinny on my last case had made the front page, but as I scanned through the rest of the story on page 7, I couldn't help but notice that my name hadn't even been mentioned. Not once. Typical. The Flatfoots are never much for sharing credit. You don't get promoted by admitting some other guy did your work for you. Not that it mattered. I wasn't in this game for the glory. The private dick gig pays the bills, and I don't have to answer to anybody telling me how to do my job. I folded the paper and dropped it on the desk. It was getting late, and well, all work and no play. I had plans tonight. I was taking my gal out on the town to celebrate the 6-month anniversary of our first date, I told her. But on the square, I decided I was finally ready to pop the question. For the first time ever, I figured I'd found the one, and I had the ring in my pocket to seal the deal. But then she walked in. I had just stood up to grab my coat when I heard the door snapping closed with a soft click that floated in the air like a breathless whisper. Even in the dim light, I had no trouble making out the fiery red lips that matched the crimson color of that ever so slightly revealing dress. She was the kind of dame you'd want at your table in any restaurant, 'cause she was a hell of a dish.
Lionel Overs?
Just like it says on the door, sister. What can I do for you?
My name is Baphomet DeVille. I'm here to retain your services in handling a rather delicate matter.
What flavor, doll? Blackmail? Cheating spouse? Or maybe some dark family secret that needs deep sixing?
Oh, nothing so lurid, Mr. Overs. I'm simply seeking the return of a piece of personal property wrongly taken from me by the sort of people I'd rather not deal with myself on a face-to-face basis.
What kind of personal property?
A tarot deck.
A tarot deck? I think I've seen my girl Angelica fool around with those things a few times. That's like those cards that gypsy fortune tellers use, huh?
Not an entirely fair description, but it fits the cultural perception, yes.
Doesn't sound particularly valuable. Why do you want it back?
The why is my own business, Mr. Overs. Will you take my case?
Sure, sweetheart.
Miss DeVille, if you please.
Right. Well, if you'll come back tomorrow morning around 9, Miss DeVille, we can discuss your case further. I'm sure we'll come to some arrangement. But right now, I'm about to run late for another engagement. I figured my offer to meet with her in the morning would allow me to make a polite exit. But instead of turning to leave, those glad gams strolled over to where I was standing. A chill ran up my spine. The kind of chill that would leave even a penguin in want of a parka. Without looking down, she reached into her purse and pulled out a stack of simoleons thicker than a sloppy lobster bisque, dropping it unceremoniously on the corner of my desk with a dull thump. Her intention was clear as she locked her dark brown peepers onto my weathered mug.
I'm afraid, Mr. Overs, that time is of the essence. We will begin now.
I don't know if it was the bite of her tone or just plain old gumshoe's intuition. There was something about this skirt that didn't sit right with me. But she just dumped a wad of dough in front of me, big enough to bankroll any rat to a lifetime supply of cheese. And as it happens, I've never much suffered from lactose intolerance. Slipping my hand into my pocket, I fingered the modest piece of ice I snagged at the pawn shop for my gal Angelica as I weighed my options. Eyeing me with a self-satisfied smile, this well-heeled broad looked as if she already knew what I was about to say next. Please have a seat, Miss DeVille, and tell me what you can about this tarot deck of yours.
If there is one card that stands out as the reinforcing example for perpetrating negative stereotypes about tarot, it is arguably Trump 15, the Devil. It is one of only 4 cards of the Visconti Sforza, the earliest extant tarot deck, to have been entirely lost to history, but its presence can be found in the vast majority of the tarots that followed. Given the complete overlap between the documented trumps of the Visconti deck and those of the later 78-card tarots, it is generally assumed that the Visconti contained a devil card as well. To fill the gap, modern reproductions of the Visconti contain devil cards reimagined and recreated by contemporary artists in the style of the original Bonifacio Bembo decks. Those who would use the devil card to condemn tarot studies as demonstrably satanic are perhaps unaware of tarot's invention in a time when, and place where, the Catholic Church exercised enormous social and political power. And other than one documented instance of ecclesiastical denouncement due to its occasional use in gambling, tarot appears to have raised no real concerns among the general populace of 15th century Italy. It does not seem unreasonable to speculate that the appearance of the devil in a deck of mere playing cards should no more raise eyebrows than the mention of the same in Scripture. His role is that of a cautionary tale. Do not submit to his temptation, lest your resulting sinful acts doom you to a terrible fate. Although the designs of the trumps were in flux for the first 200 or so years, we begin to see a solidification of the devil's depiction via the mid-17th century development of the Marseillais pattern. Standing on a pedestal, adorned by bat-like wings and other animalistic features, the devil towers above 2 naked figures who are roped by the neck to the pedestal's base, and whose hands are tied behind their backs. He, possibly an androgyne, holds a sword or club in one hand, suggesting his ability to do violence to his prisoners. This configuration gave way to a somewhat wider variety of interpretations during the emergence of the soprafino, superfine, engraved decks of the 19th century, yet remained a predominant design within the works of the occult scholars of the period. Carried forward by the likes of Worth, Waite, and to a lesser extent Crowley, we see the typical devil blueprint, but now with subtle fine-tunings intended to express their own pet theories regarding the deeper meaning of the card. 2 of the more compelling elements of this delicate evolution can be found in the Waite-Smith rendition. The first item of note is the inclusion of the inverted pentacle, now a common staple of the card in modern decks, above the devil figure's forehead. As practitioners of Wicca are well aware, the 5-pointed star, oriented upright, is suggestive of the Vitruvian Man, Da Vinci's famous illustration described as depicting the divine connection between the human form and the universe. In the upright orientation, the head and heart are situated above the genitals and the feet, thus symbolically placing higher spiritual functions above base material ones. The devil's inversion of this symbol suggests the opposite, placing the head below the feet and therefore elevating sordid desires above more divine pursuits. The second, more understated element of interest concerns the expression of the prisoner's entrapment. Unlike those of the Marseillais pattern, the hands of Waite and Smith's captives are not bound. Additionally, when compared to the depiction of the ropes shown in the Marseillais decks, the Waite-Smith chains appear to be looser. Loose enough, in fact, that they could easily use their unbound hands to slip out of the chains, freeing themselves at any time. Why, then, do they not simply do so? One brilliantly executed answer to this question appears within the devil card of Robin Wood's popular eponymous deck. In Wood's rendition, no actual devil figure appears, only 2 people futilely attempting to escape from a nondescript corridor with a treasure-laden chest. Here, the people are not chained, but the chest is, preventing the 2 from absconding with their prize. A closer look at the chains reveals their form to be in the shape of the inverted pentacle, invoking the matter-over-spirit association connected to the devil experience. Subtler and more intriguing yet, however, are the carvings on the chest itself, which depict the monkey trap. In the monkey trap phenomenon, certain monkeys can be captured by placing a desired object, usually some type of food, such as rice, inside an object with a hole just large enough for the monkey to reach in with its fingers outstretched. The hole size, however, is small enough to block the withdrawal of the monkey's hand once the creature has its prize clutched in its fist. Yet instead of releasing its prize and re-extending its fingers to withdraw its hand, the monkey sits and howls, unwilling to let go, and therefore effectively remaining trapped by choice. Like the monkey, Wood's prisoners are trapped by their own inability to give up the immovable treasure and simply walk out of the easily accessed exit located only a short way before them. Here, it is revealed that while the devil fulfills his role as the tempter of man, he levies no actual power to force action. Thus, when we choose the devil's material enticements over that which is in our own greater self-interest, we voluntarily give up our agency in order to pursue an alluring but ultimately empty and self-defeating outcome.
So that's how it went down. DeVille had made me a sweet offer, and I didn't see how I could refuse. I just hoped Angelica would understand.
Hello?
Angel baby, it's Leo. Listen, I gotta take my name off our dance card tonight. Something's come up.
Oh, Leo, not another case. You promised. You said that nothing was more important than our 6-month anniversary.
Yeah, I'm sorry, doll, but this is big. Really big. The type of big that don't take a rain check even in a hurricane.
But why tonight? Why can't it wait until tomorrow? What difference is a few hours going to make?
Look, kitten, I don't have a choice here.
No, Leo, you do have a choice. And it sounds like you've made it.
Now come on, Angel Cake, don't be
Goodbye,
like that.
Leo.
I suppose I shouldn't have been surprised by her reaction. And I wondered if she were in my place, would she have done the same thing? My line of business isn't normally the kind to make a fellow rich, or even comfortable. Couple that sweet scratch with a looker like DeVille, and you got a gig that's hard to say no to. Hard, but not impossible. By saying yes, was I giving up something I wouldn't be able to get back?
In contrast to the Devil card, the Lover's card of the Visconti Sforza deck has survived a 500-plus year journey to the present day. In its design, we can see the key elements it shares with many modern decks: a man, a woman, and an angelic figure hovering above. This is the configuration adopted by the Waite-Smith deck, with its subsequent addition of esoteric minutiae, which in turn became the template for numerous other tarots of the 20th and 21st centuries. But it is not the only template. The Marseillais pattern typically features a single man between two women, and its title is often translated, although not necessarily correctly, to the lover, singular. In some schools of esoteric philosophy, this alteration is believed to suggest another layer of interpretation beyond the stereotypical assignment of romance-related experiences. Further examination of the Marseillais-style lover card shows the Cupid-like figure pointing its arrow directly at the man, suggesting the channeling of higher energies into an earthly vessel. Once thus discharged, however, the direction in which these energies are focused is left to the discretion of the receiver. Or, rephrased in more direct terms, the man is given the agency to make a choice. It is the central idea of choice, and by extension the exercise of free will, that on the surface seems contrary, but upon deeper examination is revealed to be integral to the lover's card experience. While it may be tempting, and not necessarily entirely inaccurate, to maintain that that which our hearts yearn for is beyond our control, there remains a difference between cultivating an awareness of our passions and actively deciding to base our behavior on our emotional state. We are not obligated to partake in a toxic relationship, even when deep love for our partner endures, any more than we are compelled to commit violence against individuals who invoke feelings of intense revulsion. To employ our emotions as a scapegoat for our actions is to deny our own inherent agency. When we embrace the gift of free will, however, we must also consciously acknowledge the sacrifices that are intrinsic to the process. For in order to choose one thing, we must by definition give up another. And at last we reach the crux of the lover's experience. It is the act of giving up some part of ourselves in pursuit of that which is greater than ourselves. It is the exploration of what is wanted, what is needed, and how we can be at peace with the outcome. While implicit in many decks, the ideas of choice and sacrifice are almost literally spelled out by Robert Place in the Lover card of his Tarot of the Sevenfold Mystery. Following the basic structure of its Marseillais equivalent, we are presented with a clear dichotomy between the two women that flank the titular lover. To the left, we are presented with sensuality, the soul of appetite, while on the right stands virtue, the soul of will. The lover himself is portrayed as a chivalrous knight, thus implying that his calling is to seek the nobler path. In Place's version, the Cupid figure hovering above represents the raw and fickle power that feeds action, but the hound, labeled fidelity, inspires and guides the knight, helping him to direct Cupid's chaotic energies toward the higher purpose to which he has dedicated himself. Well aspected, we know that the lover of this card will sacrifice the seductive pleasures of appetite in order to embrace the virtuous option.
Despite a thorough line of questioning, DeVille kept pretty tight-lipped about this tarot deck of hers. All she was willing to spill was the location, and the best way for me to nab it without getting piped. It was 2 a.m. when I arrived, so it was no surprise to find the place darker than 3-day-old black coffee. DeVille warned me that there were goons stationed at the front and back entrances, but that there was an unguarded door around one side I could jimmy to slip in on the QT. After a bit of B&E, I found myself in a door-lined hallway. DeVille clued me to check the second door on the left as the most likely stash point. And bingo. Before I'd even let go of the door handle, I could see the merch straight ahead, resting on top of some kind of pedestal surrounded by candles. For a brief moment, I thought I caught a glimpse of a faint, black-tinged white glow surrounding the deck. I shook my head and blinked, and it was gone. Overs, old man, you've let that crazy dame get too far into your head. There ain't nothing hickey about a cockeyed deck of cards. Just then I was startled by a muffled yelp from behind the door. It's a good thing I don't carry a gun, because I'd probably have shot first and asked questions later. Instead, I calmly pulled the door back, ready to try and talk my way out of whatever pickle I'd gotten myself into. The last thing I'd expected to see, other than perhaps the New York Philharmonic playing dramatic stings, was my girl Angelica gagged and tied to a chair. How had she gotten mixed up in this mess? Turned out I didn't have to wait long for an answer to that question.
Lionel Overs, I presume?
I whirled around to see him standing in the doorway. He was a round hulk of an hombre. I couldn't savvy how he'd managed to sneak up on me. You have the advantage on me, mister. Who are you? And how do you know who I am?
The name's Fortune LaRue, Mr. Overs. As to my passing acquaintance with yourself, I've had Miss DeVille followed. We know she paid you a visit earlier this evening.
Then you clearly also know why I'm here. But why grab the dame? Let her go and I'll walk out of here without causing any more fuss. You can keep the deck.
Oh, you don't understand, Mr. Overs. The deck is of little use to me without the woman. Perhaps you've been too busy with your sordid little clientele to notice that your girlfriend here has been cultivating a blossoming side business as, what did you call it there? Spiritual advisor. She's built quite a reputation as one of the best readers in the city. The type of reader one needs if one is to unlock the secrets of the Maltese tarot.
The deck? So what exactly is it?
Oh, come now, Mr. Overs. Do you actually think I have enough time to relate the Maltese tarot's entire backstory in a 30-minute video? Suffice it to say that in the right hands, it details future events with 100% accuracy. Armed with that kind of foreknowledge, the possibilities for profit are endless. I expect Miss DeVille offered you a substantial sum to recover it, but let's be reasonable. When it comes to reading skills, the veil is little more than a hack. An item of such immense power is wasted on her. But Miss Angelica here is quite a different story. Her talent combined with my business acumen will unleash the potential for unlimited wealth.
Leo, don't listen to him. I won't do it.
As I said, Mr. Overs, let's be reasonable. You convince the lady here to play along, and I'll cut you both in on a percentage of the gains. Even a small portion of the return will make you rich beyond your wildest dreams.
No, Leo. That deck was created as a tool for spiritual enlightenment. Using its powers solely for material gain perverts its purpose and leads to ruin.
Oh, your girlfriend holds an endearingly quaint view of financial matters, Mr. Overs. I expect a man of your persuasive talents can convince her of a better solution to this dilemma, yes?
I could see the fear in Angelica's eyes as she silently pleaded with me to reject LaRue's offer. Yet I couldn't savvy the harm in tossing out a few cards and taking a gander at what they had to say. She tells LaRue what he wants to hear, he makes his play, we take our share, and we're set for life. It would be nice to have the cabbage to afford a better ring than that tiny rock I picked up at the pawn shop. There had to be a better way through this. I just needed to think.
By now, it should be clear that there is a strong thematic overlap between the metaphysical experiences of the lovers and devil cards. Both are intricately connected with the topics of choice and free will, yet represent opposite sides of the same coin. In the lovers, we reap the benefits of deliberate decisions made in the service of a greater good, while the devil causes suffering through relinquishment of our better judgment and subsequent indulgence of unhealthy emotions. In a reading, the lovers shows us the way forward. The devil shows us the way out. Anyone who has worked with the Rider deck for any length of time will have likely noticed this link between the lovers and the devil in the Waite-Smith images. Both feature an unclothed man and woman, standing in an Eden-like garden in the former, and a barren hellscape in the latter. Both feature a winged spiritual figure hovering above, an angel and a demon respectively. The backgrounds and costuming are different, but the overall composition remains the same, nudging us to ponder the important commonalities and differences underlying this pairing. But when it comes to encouraging a direct exploration of how the lovers and devil are entangled, arguably no deck does it better than Robert Wang's Jungian Tarot. Each of the elements of one appear in modified form on the other. The presiding angelic figure of light in the lovers appears as a dark green and sickly fiend in the devil. The bound and forlorn male and female figures in the foreground of the devil are unfettered and calm in the lovers. The differing qualities of the suns in the backgrounds further underscore the differences in the psychospiritual experiences of these two paths. Perhaps the most interesting features of these cards, however, are the mandalas adorning their bottom centers. We have already discussed the significance of the inverted pentacle in the devil's symbolism. Now we can contrast this with the equal-armed cross on the lover's card, representing the key to achieving its best outcome, the maintaining of balance within all things. Furthermore, Wang places a fish, the symbol of Christ, in the center of both mandalas but deliberately faces them in opposite directions. According to Wang, quote, "In the mandala of the lover, the fish points counterclockwise, meaning return to the Godhead. That on the devil card points clockwise toward manifestation, i.e., toward earth." Wang goes on to decry the tendency of modern religion to devalue and shun the darker aspects of things represented by the devil card experience, writing, "What has been called evil is absolutely essential to the process of individuation. There can be no light without darkness. There can be no Christ without an Antichrist. There can be no resolution of the dualities of consciousness without encounter of the black waters of discord." This explanation leaves us in a bit of a quandary, however, As the lovers and the devil present opposing representations of individual choice, yet Wang suggests that an equilibrium of the two is essential. His assertion leads us to ask, are the cards' disparate views on the question of free will reconcilable? From the standpoint of the devil card, the answer is arguably no. But in the true other side of the coin fashion intrinsic to this pairing, the lover's card would appear to respectfully disagree. To understand the final layer of symbolism in the lover's devil amalgamation, let us return to a variation of the original Visconti Sforza lover's template, one that brings an implicit aspect of the card explicitly to the forefront, the concept of union. In many of the decks that feature a single man and single woman on the lover's card, other elements are present that suggest a potential union between the two is a possible or probable outcome. Decks such as Crowley and Harris's Thoth Tarot, however, take this idea of union one step further and specifically characterize it as a union of opposites. In such examples, we are treated to a representation of the alchemical wedding, a phenomenon expressed in psychological terms by occult philosophers of the late 19th century and beyond as a synthesis of the subconscious and superconscious. In the process, aspects of the ego are absorbed and integrated in order to achieve a true purity of spirit. Crowley and Harris offer us an image of the Black Sun King with his golden crown, uniting with the silver-crowned White Moon Queen. Their blending is further emphasized by their child attendants, with the white child attending the Black King and the black child attending the White Queen. Between them, they bear symbols of all four elements: club fire, cup water, spear air, and flowers earth. The two royals hold hands as the officiant above them prepares to declare their duality merged into a singularity. As usual, Crowley's own explanation of his card is lengthy and somewhat obtuse, but for purposes of our present discussion, his inclusion of the following statement underscores our primary conclusion. The subject of this card is analysis, followed by synthesis. The first question asked by science is, of what are things composed? This having been answered, the next question is, how shall we recombine them to our greater advantage? This resumes the whole policy of tarot. In other words, free will is exercised by determining the elements in play and making an informed choice regarding their integration. Ergo, that which the devil promotes need not be rejected outright by the lover, but instead may be transmuted into a higher form. For example, base sexual appetites, previously indulged solely for individual carnal pleasure, can be elevated to tantric expressions of transcendent physical and sacred bliss with a spiritually synchronous partner. It is love with a capital L.
As I walked toward the pedestal, I could see the ends of LaRue's lips twist upward out of the corner of my eye. A smile so crooked it would make even a politician blush. With his piece still trained on me, he reached into a pocket with his free hand to pull out a knife. Cutting Angelica's hands free, he nodded for her to move to a table off one side of the room. I carried the cards over to the table, set them down, and looked Angelica straight in the eye. Angel, read the cards for Mr. LaRue. Tell him what he needs to hear. It took a moment, but I could see the subtle shift in her expression as she savvied my meaning. She picked up the cards, shuffled, dealt.
The pain you are running from, Mr. LaRue, cannot be appeased by wealth. You have to admit the truth. You love her, and you have to tell her you love her, regardless of the consequences, because it is this truth that will set you free.
Up until that day, I'd never respected any man who couldn't hold back tears. But that reading, not the one he wanted, but the one he needed, changed my mind. LaRue was right. Angel had a gift, and she had used it to change his life for the better. Who'd have thunk LaRue and DeVille secretly had the hots for each other this whole time? Their one-upsmanship turned out to be a pointless game that neither one had seen for what it really was. But Angel, armed with the Maltese tarot, cut through all that to the heart of the matter. I had never loved her more than I did in that instant. Long story short, LaRue and DeVille shared a long and happy life together. I gave Angel the tarot, and I gave her the ring, an unpretentious token with which she was nevertheless entirely delighted. I never did get rich, at least we never had a lot of money, but together we worked to make a lot of lives richer, and out of all of them, our lives were the richest of all.